The night Adeline Harrow sold herself to save her family, she wore a dress 2 seasons old and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. While London's elite twirled in silk and diamonds, she stood in the shadows of the Harrington ballroom, calculating exactly how much her dignity was worth. The answer came in the form of a man who didn't dance. Rowan Blackmore, the Duke who collected power like other men collected debts. He looked at her once across that glittering room, and she knew her life was about to become someone else's strategy. If you want to know how a forgotten daughter became the most dangerous woman in London, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The champagne had gone warm in Adeline's gloved hand. She'd been holding the same glass for 40 minutes, standing near the potted palms at the edge of the Harrington ballroom, watching her sisters float through the crowd like swans on a gilt pond. Margaret, blonde, radiant, 18, laughed at something Lord Pembroke said, her hand resting on his sleeve with practiced ease. Josephine, barely 17, blushed prettily as the youngest Ashford boy stumbled through asking for a second dance. Adeline was 23, invisible, not plain exactly. Her dark hair caught the candlelight when she moved, and her eyes, gray, like winter fog over the Thames, had a sharpness that made men uncomfortable. She'd learned early that being noticed and being seen were entirely different things. Men noticed Margaret's décolletage. They saw Adeline's calculations. "You're standing in the shadows again." The voice belonged to her father, Charles Harrow, whose face had gone florid with drink and desperation. He gripped her elbow harder than necessary, steering her behind a marble column where the music dulled to a murmur. "Papa, you're hurting me." "Do you know what they're saying?" His breath reeked of brandy. "The creditors, they're talking, Adeline, talking to each other." Her stomach dropped, but her expression didn't change. She'd perfected that particular skill over 3 years of managing his disasters. How much this time? £16,000. The number landed like a physical blow. She felt it in her chest, in her lungs. 16,000. Her mind raced through their assets. The townhouse was mortgaged, her mother's jewels already sold. The country estate entailed to a cousin who'd made it clear they'd have 6 months to vacate once Charles died. The investments in the American shipping, she started. Lost. His voice cracked. All of it. The ships went down in a storm off Nantucket. Captain Reynolds sent word last Tuesday. Last Tuesday. 5 days ago. 5 days he'd kept this from her while she'd smiled and schemed and dressed her sisters like dolls for the marriage market. Margaret's engagement, Adeline said slowly. Lord Pembroke's family will investigate before they finalize anything. If they discover, they'll withdraw. Charles gripped her shoulders, his fingers digging in. Josephine's prospects will collapse. We'll be finished, ruined. Your mother will... Christ, your mother... Stop. The word came out sharper than she intended. She softened her tone. Let me think. But there was nothing to think about, not really. She'd been doing the mathematics since he'd said 16,000. Their household expenses, the servants' wages, the costs of maintaining even the illusion of gentility, it all added up to a sum they couldn't reach. Not through economizing, not through selling, not through anything except a miracle or a marriage. And Adeline had stopped believing in miracles when she was 16. There has to be something, Charles whispered. Some way. There is. Her father's eyes, roomy and desperate, fixed on her face. What? Me. The word hung between them like a noose. Charles blinked. You? I'm not without value. She kept her voice clinical, detached. I manage the household accounts. I speak 3 languages fluently. I can navigate a dinner party without causing scandal. Some men prefer capability to beauty. Adeline, you can't be serious. Would you prefer Josephine make the sacrifice? She's younger, prettier. I'm sure we could find someone willing to pay for... Don't. His voice broke. Don't say it like that. But that was exactly what it was, and they both knew it. A transaction. Her life, her body, her future, traded for her family's survival. The only question was whether she'd be the one to suggest it or wait for him to work up the courage. She'd never been good at waiting. I need you to make inquiries, she said. Discreetly. Men of means who might be looking for a wife with practical skills rather than a large dowry. This is madness. This is mathematics. She pulled away from him, smoothing her skirts. And we're out of time. The ballroom had grown hotter, more crowded. Adeline moved through it like a ghost, watching the living celebrate their certainties. Music swirled. Silks rustled. Somewhere, someone laughed, a bright, thoughtless sound that made her chest ache. She found her mother holding court near the refreshment table, resplendent in emerald silk that had cost more than 3 months of servants' wages. Eleanor Harrow had been beautiful once. She was still handsome, in the way of women who'd spent their lives being admired and hadn't quite adjusted to being merely looked at. Adeline, darling, her mother's smile was warm, genuine. Where have you been hiding? Nowhere, Mama. Just watching. You should be dancing. Eleanor's gaze flicked toward a cluster of young men near the orchestra. Mr. Crawford was asking after you earlier. Mr. Crawford was 42, balding, and still lived with his mother. He also had a comfortable income from coal mines in Durham. How thoughtful of him, Adeline murmured. Her mother caught something in her tone. Walk with me. They moved toward the terrace doors where the October air promised relief from the crushing heat. Outside, the London night was clear and cold. Adeline could see her breath misting in the lamplight. You're plotting something, Eleanor said. I can always tell. Papa told you about the ships. Her mother's face went very still. He said there were complications. The complications have left us £16,000 in debt. Eleanor swayed slightly. Adeline caught her elbow, steadying her. That's not possible, her mother whispered. The American venture was supposed to... Charles promised it was secure. Charles promised many things. The bitterness leaked through before Adeline could stop it. The entailment on the estate, the investments in railways, the... Stop. Eleanor pulled away. I won't hear you speak of your father that way. Would you prefer I lie? Pretend we're not standing on the edge of a cliff? I would prefer you remember that he's trying his best. Adeline laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. His best has bankrupted us 3 times in 5 years. His best required me to sell grandmother's pearls to pay the butcher. His best means Margaret's engagement will crumble the moment Pembroke's solicitors start asking questions. Her mother's hand cracked across her face. The slap wasn't hard, not really, but the shock of it, the utter unexpectedness, froze Adeline in place. Her cheeks stung, her eyes watered. You will not, Eleanor said, her voice shaking. Speak of this family's struggles as though you are separate from them. We are Harrows, we endure. By selling daughters? Another silence, colder than the first. Eleanor's expression shifted, understanding dawning. What have you done? What needed doing? Adeline touched her cheek, feeling the heat of the impact. I've asked Papa to make inquiries, discreet ones, for men who might value practicality over passion. You mean old men, desperate men. I mean solvent men. Her mother turned away, gripping the terrace railing. Her knuckles went white. I won't allow it. You don't have a choice. Adeline's voice was gentle now, tired. None of us do. There has to be another way. Name it. Eleanor opened her mouth, closed it. Her shoulders sagged. I thought not, Adeline said. She stayed outside longer than she should have, letting the cold bite through her thin dress. When she finally returned to the ballroom, the dancing had reached its peak, couples whirling, the music loud and bright and relentless. And then the crowd parted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but there was a shift, a ripple of awareness that moved through the room like wind through wheat. Conversations faltered, heads turned. The Duke of Blackmore had arrived. Adeline had never seen him in person, but his reputation preceded him like a harbinger. 31 years old, inherited his title at 19 after his father died in a riding accident. Doubled the family fortune through investments in shipping, railways, and industries most aristocrats considered beneath them. Never attended social events, never married, never even courted, as far as anyone knew. And yet here he stood, in the Harrington ballroom, looking like he'd wandered in by mistake and was already regretting it. He was tall, taller than the men around him, with dark hair worn slightly longer than fashion dictated, and a face that might have been handsome if it hadn't been so brutally cold. His evening clothes were perfect, expensive, and utterly devoid of personality. No flashy waistcoat, no ornate cravat, just black and white and sharp edges. His eyes swept the room with the interest of a man cataloging merchandise. And then they found her. Adeline felt it like a hook sinking into her chest. His gaze, dark, assessing, completely unreadable, locked onto hers across 30 feet of crowded ballroom. She couldn't look away, couldn't breathe. He started walking toward her. The crowd didn't part this time. It simply ceased to exist. There was no music, no chatter, no swirl of silk and candlelight. Just him, moving through the room like a predator who'd spotted prey, and her, frozen at the edge of the dance floor like a deer that knew running would only make the chase more interesting. He stopped 3 feet away, didn't bow, didn't smile. "Miss Harrow." His voice was low, clipped, and absolutely certain, as though he'd known exactly who she was the moment he'd entered the room. "Your Grace." She managed a curtsy, muscle memory overriding panic. "I'm honored." "No, you're not." He said it without inflection, a simple statement of fact. "You're terrified." Her spine stiffened. "I beg your pardon?" "You should be." His gaze traveled over her, not lascivious, just thorough, like he was calculating measurements. "I understand your father has debts." The bottom dropped out of her stomach. Around them, the crowd had gone silent. Not obviously, people were still pretending to dance, to converse, but she could feel the attention focused on them like heat from a flame. "I don't know what you're referring to," she said carefully. £16,000 to various creditors, mortgages on both properties, failed investments in American shipping." He paused. "Should I continue?" Her face burned. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know things." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Your father approached my secretary this afternoon, very discreetly, asking if I might be interested in, how did he put it? A mutually beneficial arrangement." Oh God, Papa had moved fast. "I see." Her voice came out steady, which felt like a small miracle. "And are you interested?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you faint when I tell you what I want." Something in his tone, dry, almost amused, sparked anger through her shock. "I don't faint, Your Grace." "Good, then let's speak plainly." He took a step closer, dropping his voice. "I need a duchess, not a wife. A duchess. Someone capable of managing a household of 40 servants, hosting political dinners without causing international incidents, and navigating society without embarrassing me. In return, I'll pay your father's debts, settle additional funds on your sisters, and ensure your family maintains their current lifestyle." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "That's very generous." "It's not generosity, it's a business transaction." His eyes, brown, she realized, so dark they were almost black, bored into hers. "I have no interest in romance, no patience for sentiment. I need competence, discretion, and complete loyalty. If you can provide those things, we'll deal well together. And if I can't, then we'll have a very unpleasant marriage." The honesty of it stole her breath. No pretty lies, no false promises. Just the cold, brutal truth laid out like a contract. "I assume you're aware," she said slowly, "that most women would find this offer insulting. Most women aren't in your position." "And what position is that?" "Desperate." The word hit like a slap, but he wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. He wasn't wrong. "When would this marriage take place?" she asked. 3 weeks. Special license, small ceremony." He paused. "Unless you need time to reconsider." "Would time change our circumstances?" "No." "Then there's nothing to reconsider." She met his gaze squarely. "I accept your offer, Your Grace." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe? Or respect. It was gone too quickly to identify. "You haven't asked about the expectations?" "You've made them clear. Competence, discretion, loyalty." She lifted her chin. "I can provide all three." "And the rest of it? The sharing of a home, a bed? I understand what marriage entails." Her cheeks heated, but she didn't look away. "I'm not a child." "No," he said quietly. "You're certainly not." For a long moment they stood there, two strangers negotiating the terms of a lifetime together as though discussing the price of livestock. Then he did something unexpected. He offered his hand. "One dance," he said, "so society knows the arrangement is official." Adeline stared at his outstretched palm. It was a practical hand, broad, calloused in odd places, the nails trimmed ruthlessly short, not the soft, manicured hand of a man who'd never done anything more strenuous than sign his name. She placed her fingers in his. His grip was warm, firm, and utterly impersonal. He led her onto the dance floor as the orchestra struck up a waltz, and the crowd fell back to watch. "You dance well," she observed as they began to move. He did, effortlessly, without the stiffness some men brought to ballrooms. "I do many things well." His tone was matter-of-fact. "It's why I'm successful." "Modesty must not be among your many talents." Was that amusement in his eyes? "Modesty is for people who have something to hide." "And you don't?" "Everyone has something to hide, Miss Harrow." He turned them smoothly through a corner. "The question is whether it will prove inconvenient." "Should I be worried about your inconvenient secrets?" "No more than I should be worried about yours." She laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound surprised her, bursting out before she could stop it. Several nearby dancers turned to stare. "What's funny?" Rowan asked. "You, this, all of it." She shook her head. "I've spent 3 years trying to secure good marriages for my sisters, and I couldn't manage it. You walk into a ballroom and arrange one for yourself in 5 minutes. 6 minutes. He glanced at the clock on the mantel. "And I didn't arrange it. You did." "By accepting. By being the kind of woman who could accept." His gaze sharpened. "Most couldn't. They'd weep or argue or try to negotiate for affection I'm not capable of giving. You understood the terms and made a decision. That's rare. Or desperate, as you so kindly noted. Desperation doesn't preclude intelligence." The music swelled. He pulled her slightly closer, still proper, still respectful, but near enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and woody, like cedar and smoke. "You'll do well at Blackmore House." "You sound very certain." "I am." He paused. "Are you not?" Adeline thought about her sisters, radiant and laughing, her mother's stricken face, her father's shaking hands, the creditors circling like vultures, waiting for the Harrow family to finally, irrevocably fall. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but terror is better than failure." Something shifted in his expression, softened, maybe, though the change was so subtle she might have imagined it. "Good," he said. "Fear keeps you sharp." The waltz ended. He released her with the same impersonal efficiency he'd used to claim her, then offered a brief bow. "I'll send my solicitor tomorrow to finalize the settlements," he said. "The ceremony will be October 28th at St. George's, Hanover Square. You'll move to Blackmore House directly after." "So soon?" "Is there a reason to wait?" "Yes," she wanted to say. "I need time to mourn the life I'm not going to have. Time to prepare for becoming someone's Duchess instead of someone's daughter. Time to remember what my own dreams looked like before I buried them under everyone else's needs." But she'd buried those dreams years ago, and mourning wouldn't resurrect them. "No," she said. "No reason." He nodded once, then turned and walked away, back through the crowd, out the ballroom doors, gone as quickly and thoroughly as he'd arrived. Adeline stood alone on the dance floor, her heart still racing, her hands still warm from his touch. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to prepare herself for a marriage without love, to a man without mercy, in a world that would judge every misstep she made. 3 weeks to become someone she barely recognized. The music started again. Couples swirled past her, their faces bright with wine and happiness and the kind of thoughtless joy that came from not having to sell yourself to survive. Adeline turned and walked toward the terrace, needing air, needing space, needing anything except the crushing weight of what she'd just agreed to. Outside, the October wind had picked up. It whipped her skirts, bit through her thin dress, made her eyes water. Or maybe that was something else entirely. "I hope you know what you're doing." She turned. Margaret stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the ballroom's golden light. Her expression was unreadable. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Adeline said. "Do you?" Margaret stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "Because, from where I stood, It looked like you just agreed to marry a stranger who treats you like a business acquisition. That's precisely what I am. Adeline, don't. She held up a hand. Please don't tell me I deserve better or that I should wait for love. We both know that's not possible. Margaret's face crumpled. This isn't fair. Fair? Adeline laughed, the sound bitter. Margaret, you're engaged to an earl's son who adores you. Josephine has 3 viable prospects. Mama gets to keep her emerald silk and her social standing. Papa's creditors won't seize the townhouse. What about any of this feels unfair to you? I meant unfair to you. I'll survive. Will you? Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. He looked at you like you were a horse he was considering purchasing. Then it's fortunate I'm an excellent horse. Adeline turned back toward the lights of London, spreading out below them like scattered diamonds. Go back inside, Margaret. Lord Pembroke will be looking for you. I don't want to leave you alone. I've been alone for years. I'm used to it. Margaret hesitated, then slowly walked back toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, she said quietly, you're the bravest person I know. Then she was gone, leaving Adeline alone with the wind and the cold and the terrible crystalline certainty that she'd just traded her entire future for her family's comfort. No, not traded. Sacrificed. There was a difference. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of contracts and preparations. Rowan's solicitor, a thin, nervous man named Pemberton, arrived the following morning with documents outlining the marriage settlements in excruciating detail. Adeline read every page, asked pointed questions about the trust structures, and negotiated an additional £1,000 per year for her own personal use. Pemberton looked scandalized. His Grace has been more than generous. His Grace is acquiring a wife who will save him tens of thousands in social missteps and political embarrassments, Adeline said calmly. £1,000 is reasonable compensation for that expertise. The next day, Pemberton returned with the amendment included. She saw Rowan only twice more before the wedding, once at a formal dinner at the Pembroke estate, where they sat 3 seats apart and exchanged exactly 4 words. Good evening, Your Grace. Miss Harrow. And once when he arrived unannounced at the Harrow townhouse to inspect what she planned to bring to Blackmore House. Is this all? He stood in her bedroom surveying her belongings with the same clinical detachment he'd shown in the ballroom. I prefer to travel light. You'll need more. He handed her a card. This is my modiste. She'll outfit you appropriately. I have dresses. You have adequate dresses. His gaze swept over her current gown, a perfectly respectable day dress in dove gray. As my Duchess, you'll need more than adequate. Pride stung. I'm not a doll to be dressed up. No, you're a representative of one of England's oldest ducal houses. His voice was flat, brooking no argument. Everything you wear, say, and do reflects on that house. I need you to look the part. She wanted to argue, wanted to throw something at his arrogant, aristocratic face. Instead, she pocketed the card. As you wish, Your Grace. He nodded, satisfied, and left without another word. That night, she sat at her small writing desk and stared at the blank paper in front of her. She'd meant to write to her childhood friend Clara, explaining the situation. But how did you explain selling yourself without sounding either pathetic or mercenary? Dear Clara, I'm to be married in 2 weeks to a man I don't love and who certainly doesn't love me. He looks at me like I'm a ledger requiring balance. I've agreed to spend my life managing his household and warming his bed in exchange for my family's financial security. This is, apparently, what passes for a successful match. Yours in misery, Adeline. She crumpled the paper and threw it in the fire. Picky sashi what? Yes. The wedding itself was exactly as promised. Small, efficient, devoid of joy. St. George's at 10 in the morning. Autumn light filtering through stained glass. 20 people in the pews, mostly Rowan's political associates, and a handful of family members who looked as though they'd been conscripted rather than invited. Adeline wore ivory silk that cost more than her entire previous wardrobe combined. The modiste had outdone herself. The gown was elegant, sophisticated, and made her look like someone important rather than someone desperate. Her father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Her mother sat in the front pew, ramrod straight, her face a careful mask of pride. Margaret and Josephine flanked her, both dabbing at their eyes with lace handkerchiefs. Rowan stood at the altar like a statue, his face carved from marble. When she reached him, he didn't smile, didn't take her hand, just waited while the vicar began the ceremony in a droning voice that made the whole thing sound like a property transfer rather than a marriage. "Wilt thou have this woman to be thy wedded wife?" "I will." His voice was steady, certain, a man completing a transaction. "Wilt thou have this man to be thy wedded husband?" Adeline looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since entering the church. His dark eyes met hers without warmth or hesitation. This was who he was, cold, controlled, utterly self-possessed. There would be no tender moments, no growing affection, no gradual warming of his regard. This was the bargain. This was her life now. "I will," she said. The vicar smiled, oblivious to the complete absence of emotion between them. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Rowan leaned in and kissed her, brief, chaste, perfunctory. His lips were warm against hers, but there was nothing behind the gesture. No desire, no tenderness, just duty. When he pulled back, she saw something flicker in his expression. Not regret exactly, more like acknowledgement. They'd both done this, chosen this. Whatever came next was theirs to navigate. "Your Grace," he murmured. It took her a moment to realize he was addressing her. She was a duchess now. The thought made her want to laugh and cry and run simultaneously. Instead, she placed her hand on his arm and let him lead her back down the aisle, past the sparse crowd, into a future she couldn't imagine and didn't want. The wedding breakfast was held at Blackmore House, a massive Georgian structure in Mayfair that made the Harrow townhouse look like a cottage. Adeline barely tasted the food, barely heard the polite conversation, barely registered the well wishes from people she'd never met, and would now have to remember. At some point, Rowan's hand appeared on her elbow. "Come with me." He led her away from the gathering, through corridors lined with ancestral portraits, up a sweeping staircase, to a door at the end of a long hallway. "Your rooms," he said, opening it. The suite beyond was enormous. Sitting room, dressing room, bedroom with a 4-poster bed large enough to sleep 6. Everything was done in shades of cream and gold, elegant and impersonal. "The connecting door leads to my chambers," Rowan continued, gesturing. "I'll knock before entering." "That's considerate." "I'm not a brute," he said it matter-of-factly, "despite what you may think." She wanted to ask what she was supposed to think of a man who'd purchased a wife like he'd purchased his evening shoes. But exhaustion was setting in, emotional, physical, crushing. "When do you expect me to begin my duties?" she asked instead. "Tomorrow is soon enough." He studied her face, and for the first time she saw something like concern. "You look exhausted." "It's been a long day." "Then rest." He moved toward the connecting door, then paused. "Adeline." It was the first time he'd used her Christian name. It sounded strange in his clipped, formal voice. "Yes?" "You did well today. At the church. At the breakfast." He hesitated, as though the next words were difficult. "I know this isn't what you wanted, but I'll do my best to make it tolerable." And then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving her alone in a golden room in a stranger's house, wearing a ring that felt like a shackle and a title that felt like a lie. Duchess. Adeline Blackmore, Duchess of Blackmore. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed, still wearing her wedding gown, and finally let herself feel everything she'd been holding back for 3 weeks. The fear, the grief, the desperate clawing anger at the unfairness of it all. She pressed her fist against her mouth to muffle the sound, but the sobs came anyway, wrenching, ugly, impossible to stop. This was her life now. This cold, loveless arrangement with a man who saw her as a solution to a problem rather than a person worth knowing. This beautiful prison dressed up as privilege. This slow death of every dream she'd ever had. When the tears finally stopped, she was hollow, emptied out. A vessel waiting to be filled with whatever Rowan Blackmore required her to become. Somewhere below, she could hear the sounds of the wedding breakfast winding down. Laughter, music, the clink of champagne glasses celebrating a union that wasn't worth celebrating. Adeline stood, walked to the mirror, and looked at her reflection. The Duchess of Blackmore stared back, poised, elegant, utterly composed. She would learn to wear this face, this role, this life. She didn't have any other choice. Morning came too quickly. Adeline woke to unfamiliar sounds, the creak of floorboards beyond her door, the distant murmur of servants, the rattle of a coal scuttle being dragged across stone. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory crashed back. The wedding, the vast golden bedroom, Rowan's retreating figure through the connecting door. She was a duchess now, whatever that meant. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Your Grace? The title still felt like it belonged to someone else. Adeline sat up, pulling the coverlid around herself. Come in. A woman entered, middle-aged, stern-faced, dressed in the crisp black and white of a lady's maid. I'm Mrs. Halloway, Your Grace. His Grace asked me to attend you this morning. Where is... Adeline paused, realizing she didn't even know the name of her own maid. She'd had to let Sarah go 3 months ago when the household budget had gotten too tight. You don't have a personal maid yet, Your Grace. His Grace thought you'd prefer to select your own staff. Mrs. Halloway's tone suggested she found this decision highly irregular. In the meantime, I'm to assist with your morning routine and introduce you to the household. The household, right. 40 servants, Rowan had said. 40 people she was now responsible for managing. The weight of it settled on her chest like a stone. Give me 20 minutes, Adeline said. Then we can begin. Mrs. Halloway's eyebrows rose fractionally. Apparently duchesses weren't supposed to dismiss their attendants quite so bluntly. But she curtsied and withdrew. Adeline dressed herself in one of the new gowns the modiste had sent. Deep blue wool with minimal trim, practical rather than ornamental. She twisted her hair into a simple knot, splashed cold water on her face to reduce the puffiness from last night's tears, and studied her reflection. The Duchess of Blackmore looked back at her, pale but composed. She could do this. She had to do this. The alternative was admitting that she'd sold herself for nothing. When Mrs. Halloway returned, she led Adeline on a dizzying tour of Blackmore House. 6 floors, 43 rooms, 3 kitchens, a ballroom that could hold 200 guests, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves that made Adeline's fingers itch to explore. Parlors and drawing rooms and morning rooms and sitting rooms, each more opulent than the last. The household runs on a strict schedule, Mrs. Halloway explained as they descended to the kitchens. Breakfast at 8, luncheon at 1, dinner at 7. His Grace is particular about punctuality. I'm sure he's particular about many things, Adeline murmured. Mrs. Halloway's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. His Grace values efficiency above all else. As long as the household runs smoothly, he doesn't interfere. They reached the kitchens, where a red-faced woman in her 50s was orchestrating breakfast preparations with military precision. She looked up when they entered, her expression shifting from concentration to barely concealed hostility. Mrs. Halloway. The woman's tone was frosty. I wasn't informed we'd have visitors this morning. This is Her Grace, the new Duchess, Mrs. Halloway said pointedly. She's touring the household. The cook's face went through a complicated series of expressions. Surprise, resentment, forced politeness, before settling on professional neutrality. Your Grace, I'm Mrs. Patterson. I've been managing His Grace's kitchens for 12 years. 12 years. Meaning she'd been here since before Rowan inherited, had probably served his father. And now some upstart bride was invading her domain. Adeline recognized the territorial aggression immediately. She'd dealt with similar dynamics when trying to manage the Harrow household staff after her mother had started delegating responsibilities. Mrs. Patterson. Adeline kept her voice pleasant but firm. I'm not here to criticize or make changes. I'm here to learn how Blackmore House operates so I can support your work more effectively. The cook blinked. Support my work? His Grace has made it clear that this household runs because of people like you, experienced, skilled, dedicated. I have no intention of disrupting that. Adeline paused. However, I will expect regular reports on expenditures and menus. Not because I distrust your judgment, but because I'm responsible for the household accounts now. I can't manage what I don't understand. Mrs. Patterson's hostility didn't disappear, but it softened slightly. His Grace never asked for reports. His Grace had other priorities. I don't. Adeline smiled. Shall we say weekly meetings? Friday mornings, perhaps? After breakfast service? The cook looked to Mrs. Halloway, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Friday mornings, Mrs. Patterson agreed grudgingly. They continued through the kitchens, the servants' quarters, the wine cellar. Everywhere Adeline went, she encountered the same pattern. Initial suspicion, followed by cautious acceptance once she made it clear she wasn't there to upend their world. By the time they finished, it was nearly 11. Mrs. Halloway led her to a small office on the second floor. A feminine space with pale green walls and delicate furniture that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The previous Duchess's study, Mrs. Halloway explained. It's been closed since Her Grace passed away 15 years ago. 15 years. Rowan's mother then. He would have been 16 when she died. Adeline ran her fingers along the dusty desk. Has anyone asked to use this room since then? No, Your Grace. His Grace gave orders it was to remain undisturbed. I see. She looked around at the frozen shrine to a dead woman. Well, I'll need a workspace. Is there another available? Mrs. Halloway's expression shifted to something like approval. There's a smaller study near the library, less, sentimental. Perfect. Have someone prepare it, please. As Mrs. Halloway left to make arrangements, Adeline sank into a chair by the window overlooking the gardens. The morning tour had been exhausting, but she'd learned several critical things. The household staff was competent but set in their ways. Mrs. Halloway was a potential ally, and Rowan's mother's ghost still haunted these halls in ways he probably didn't realize. You're up early. She turned. Rowan stood in the doorway, dressed for riding in dark breeches and a coat that made his shoulders look even broader. He looked softer, somehow, less like a statue and more like an actual person. I wanted to meet the household, Adeline said. And? He leaned against the doorframe. How many have threatened to quit? None yet, though Mrs. Patterson looked close. She always looks close. He paused. She's the best cook in London. Handle her carefully. I offered her weekly meetings to review menus and expenditures. She seemed mollified. Something crossed his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You're establishing authority quickly. You said you needed competence. I'm providing it. He studied her for a long moment, and she fought the urge to squirm under his gaze. Finally, he nodded. I have business in the city today. I'll be gone until dinner. Should I expect you at 7 then? Yes. He turned to leave, then paused. Adeline. Yes? Thank you. For yesterday. For... He gestured vaguely, not making this more difficult than it needs to be. Before she could respond, he was gone, his boots echoing down the hallway. She sat in the silent room, trying to parse what had just happened. Had that been gratitude, appreciation, or just another transaction, her competence exchanged for his courtesy? With Rowan, it was impossible to tell. The rest of the day passed in a blur of ledgers, household accounts, and staff introductions. By the time 7 o'clock arrived, Adeline's head throbbed and her eyes burned from squinting at the housekeeper's cramped handwriting. She changed into a dinner gown, emerald silk that the modiste had insisted would bring out her eyes, and made her way to the formal dining room. Rowan was already there, standing by the fireplace with a glass of whiskey. He changed as well, into evening clothes that made him look every inch the aristocrat he was. You look tired, he observed. I spent 6 hours reviewing accounts. She accepted the glass of wine a footman offered. Your household expenditures are excessive. His eyebrows rose. Excessive? You're paying 30% above market rate for coal. Your wine merchant is charging you for vintages you're not receiving. And someone in the kitchens is inflating the costs of basic supplies and pocketing the difference. Silence. Then, how long did it take you to determine all that? 3 hours of comparing invoices to deliveries. She took a sip of wine. The coal and wine are simple incompetence or laziness. The kitchen theft is deliberate. I'll need your permission to investigate further. Rowan's expression was unreadable. You've been my wife for exactly 1 day, and you've already uncovered embezzlement. Is that a problem? No. He drained his whiskey. It's impressive. Handle it however you see fit. Just don't cause a scandal. Dinner was announced. They moved to the table, a massive mahogany thing designed to seat 20 but set for 2 at one end. Adeline took her place across from Rowan, the space between them feeling both intimate and vast. "Tell me about your day," she said as the first course arrived. He looked startled. "My day? You said you had business in the city. I'm curious what that entailed." "Parliamentary committees, budget negotiations, the usual tedium." "Which committees?" "Trade and revenue, mostly. There's a bill on tariffs that needs amending." He paused. "Why?" "Because I'm your wife. I should understand your work." "Most wives don't care about parliamentary procedure." "I'm not most wives." She met his gaze steadily. "You wanted competence, Your Grace. That includes understanding the political landscape you navigate." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the cool facade. "You really meant it, didn't you, when you agreed to this arrangement?" "Of course I meant it. What would be the point of agreeing otherwise?" "Most people say things they don't mean all the time." "I'm not most people." He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face completely. For a moment she glimpsed what he might look like without the armor, younger, almost boyish, unexpectedly appealing. Then the moment passed, and the Duke returned. "The trade bill," he said, launching into an explanation of tariff structures and colonial policy that should have been boring, but somehow wasn't. He spoke with precision and passion, his hands moving to illustrate points, his eyes brightening when he described a particularly clever political maneuver. Adeline found herself leaning forward, asking questions, engaging with the material in a way she hadn't engaged with anything in months. This was what she'd missed. Not romance or affection, but intellectual partnership. The meeting of minds. Maybe, she thought, this arrangement wouldn't be completely unbearable after all. They were on the third course when the butler appeared, looking apologetic. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption. Lady Cordelia Ashford is here. She says it's urgent." Every trace of warmth drained from Rowan's face. His jaw tightened, his knuckles going white around his fork. "Tell her I'm not receiving visitors." "I did, Your Grace. She insisted I inform you personally that she won't leave until you see her." Adeline watched Rowan's face carefully. Whoever this woman was, she had power over him, enough to crack his composure. "Shall I have her removed?" the butler asked. "No." The word came out harsh. Rowan stood, throwing his napkin on the table. "I'll handle it. Adeline, stay here." "Who is she?" He looked at her then, and she saw something raw in his expression, fear maybe, or regret. "Someone from my past," he said. "Someone who should have stayed there." He left before she could ask anything else. Adeline sat in the suddenly empty dining room, her appetite gone. The servants cleared plates silently, their faces carefully blank, but she caught the exchanged glances. They knew who Lady Cordelia was. They knew why her arrival had rattled their master. And Adeline, the brand new Duchess, knew nothing. She gave him 10 minutes. Then she stood, ignoring the startled looks from the footmen, and went to find her husband. Voices led her to the drawing room, a woman's, low and musical, and Rowan's, tight with barely controlled anger. "You can't just appear after 3 years and expect, 'I can do whatever I please, darling. You taught me that.'" Adeline paused in the doorway. The woman inside was stunning, tall, blonde, dressed in crimson silk that clung to curves designed to make men forget their own names. She stood too close to Rowan, one hand resting possessively on his arm. "You're married now," the woman continued. "How deliciously scandalous. I had to see the poor creature who agreed to tie herself to you." "Cordelia, is she pretty?" "No, don't tell me. Let me guess." She turned toward the door, her eyes landing on Adeline with predatory precision. Oh, darling, you didn't." Adeline stepped into the room, chin high. "I'm Adeline Blackmore, the Duchess of Blackmore." "And you are?" "Lady Cordelia Ashford." The woman's smile was all teeth. "Though I suppose you could say I'm the one who got away." Rowan's face had gone white. "Cordelia, this is inappropriate." "Is it? I think your new wife deserves to know exactly what she's gotten herself into." Cordelia circled Adeline like a shark scenting blood. "Did he tell you we were engaged once?" "No. How like him. Rowan's always been so good at compartmentalizing." "We were never engaged," Rowan bit out. Semantics. Cordelia waved a dismissive hand. We were in love. We were planning a future. And then his father died, and suddenly I wasn't quite good enough for a duke. That's not what happened. Isn't it? She turned back to Adeline. He promised me everything, you know. Love, devotion, a life together. Then he inherited, and I became inconvenient. Adeline looked at Rowan. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His hands were fisted at his sides. Whatever had happened between them, it still had power over him. Why are you here? Adeline asked quietly. Cordelia laughed. Because I heard about the wedding, and I simply had to meet the woman who agreed to marry London's coldest man. Tell me, Your Grace, does he still wake up screaming, or has he learned to control that particular weakness? Get out. Rowan's voice was lethal. Make me. I said, it's all right. Adeline stepped between them, forcing Cordelia to face her directly. I'll walk Lady Cordelia out. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Adeline's expression stopped him. He gave a curt nod and stalked from the room. Cordelia's smile widened. How gallant! Playing the dutiful wife already. Adeline waited until she heard Rowan's footsteps fade. Then she turned to Cordelia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Let's be clear about something, she said softly. I don't know what happened between you and Rowan, and frankly, I don't care. What I do know is that you walked into my home uninvited, insulted my husband, and tried to humiliate me. Your home? Cordelia's laugh was sharp. Darling, this will never be your home. You're just keeping the Duchess seat warm until what? He comes to his senses and runs back to you? Adeline took a step closer. You said he promised you everything. Then you said he chose his title over you. Which story is true, Lady Cordelia? Because they can't both be. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the other woman's face. Here's what I think happened, Adeline continued. I think you loved him when he was nobody. Then he became somebody important, and suddenly you wanted guarantees he wasn't willing to give. So you issued an ultimatum, marry me now or lose me forever, and he called your bluff. Cordelia's face went hard. You know nothing. I know enough. Adeline moved toward the door, opening it. I know you're here because you thought a new wife would be threatened by you. You wanted to establish dominance, maybe plant some seeds of doubt. Unfortunately for you, I'm not the kind of woman who's easily threatened. You should be. Cordelia's voice dropped to a hiss. He'll never love you. He's not capable of it. Good. Adeline met her gaze squarely. Because I didn't marry him for love. I married him for practical reasons that don't include romantic fantasies about changing him. She gestured to the open door. The butler will see you out, Lady Cordelia. Don't come back. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Two women locked in a battle neither had expected to fight. Then Cordelia laughed, but it sounded forced. He really did choose well. You're just as cold as he is. Perhaps that's why we'll succeed where you failed. Cordelia swept past her, crimson silk rustling. At the doorway, she paused. He still loves me, you know, she said. He'll always love me. Then why isn't he here fighting for you? Adeline asked. Cordelia's face crumpled for just a second, genuine pain breaking through the performance. Then she was gone, heels clicking rapidly down the hall. Adeline closed the door and leaned against it, her heart hammering. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the wood, forcing herself to breathe slowly. She'd just made an enemy, a powerful, connected, vindictive enemy. But what choice had she had? Show weakness on her second day as Duchess? Let some former lover waltz in and establish that Adeline was temporary, replaceable, unimportant? No. Whatever happened next, at least she'd drawn a line. She found Rowan in his study, staring out the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. You should have let me handle her, he said. You were handling her, it wasn't working. She'll retaliate, Cordelia always does. Let her try. Adeline moved to stand beside him. I'm not afraid of her. He finally looked at her, and the expression on his face was complicated. Surprise, respect, something that might have been gratitude. You should be. She has influence, connections. She could make your life very difficult. My life is already difficult. Adeline kept her voice matter-of-fact. I'm married to a man who sees me as a business acquisition, managing a household that resents my presence. And apparently I now have a vindictive former lover of my husband's as an enemy. Difficult is my new normal. I didn't love her. The words came out abruptly, defensive. Adeline blinked. What? Cordelia. I didn't love her. He drained his whiskey. She's right that we planned to marry, but it was never about love. It was about convenience, Adeline supplied. Rebellion. He laughed bitterly. My father wanted me to marry strategically, so I chose the most unsuitable woman I could find, beautiful, charming, utterly inappropriate for a future duke. When he died, I realized how stupid I'd been. Cordelia wanted the title, not me. So I ended it. And she's held a grudge ever since. A 3-year grudge that apparently hasn't mellowed with time. He turned to face her fully. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, for not warning you. Would a warning have changed anything? No, but you deserve to know. Adeline considered him, this complicated, closed-off man who'd somehow convinced her to marry him despite every instinct screaming that it was a terrible idea. I don't need to know about your past lovers, she said finally. Unless they're going to keep appearing at dinner. She's the only one. Good. She paused. Though I am curious about the screaming. His face shuddered immediately. That's not... You don't have to tell me. She held up a hand. I'm just saying, if you do wake up screaming, I should probably know so I don't panic. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he sighed. Nightmares? After my father died, the accident was... He stopped, visibly struggling. I saw it happen. Couldn't do anything to stop it. For months afterward, I'd dream about it. Wake up convinced I could have saved him if I'd just been faster, smarter, better. That's not how accidents work. I know that now. His voice was flat. Took a while to believe it. Adeline wanted to reach for him, offer comfort, something, but she had no idea if he'd welcome it or recoil. So instead she said, I grind my teeth when I'm anxious. Apparently it's very annoying. He blinked, thrown by the non sequitur. What? My sister Margaret used to complain about it when we shared a room, said it sounded like I was chewing stones. She shrugged. We all have our charming quirks. A smile tugged at his mouth, small but genuine. Grinding teeth and nightmares. What a pair we make. At least we're honest about our flaws. Are we? He studied her. You haven't told me yours yet. The real ones. I'm stubborn, impatient. I hold grudges. She met his gaze. And I can't stand being lied to, even small lies, even kind ones meant to protect me. Noted. He refilled his glass, then poured one for her. To honesty, then, and difficult lives. She took the glass, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. To difficult lives, she echoed. They drank in silence, standing side by side in the darkening study, two strangers learning the shape of their shared cage. Outside, London's night sounds drifted through the window, carriages rattling past, distant laughter, the cry of a street vendor, normal life continuing without them. She was wrong, you know, Adeline said quietly. Cordelia, about you not being capable of love. How would you know? Because incapable people don't have nightmares about failing to save their fathers. She set down her glass. You feel things, you just don't show them. Feeling and showing aren't the same thing. No, but one requires the other to exist. She turned toward the door. I should let you work. I assume you have documents to review or empires to maintain. Adeline, she paused. What you did tonight, he said. Standing up to Cordelia, protecting... He seemed to struggle with the word. Thank you. We're married, she said simply. That means we protect each other, even from vindictive former lovers. She left him there, alone with his whiskey and his ghosts. Back in her golden bedroom, Adeline finally let herself collapse. The day had been endless. Household tours, financial audits, surprise confrontations with beautiful women who clearly still had claims on her husband's past. She'd handled it, all of it, hadn't broken, hadn't cried, hadn't shown weakness. But the cost of that control was exhaustion that went bone deep. She changed into her nightgown and crawled into the enormous bed, half expecting to lie awake for hours, replaying every moment. Instead, sleep claimed her almost instantly. She woke once in the deep night to a sound from Rowan's room. A sharp cry, quickly muffled. The nightmares he'd mentioned. Part of her wanted to go to him. The other part, the part that remembered this was a transaction, not a marriage, stayed frozen in bed. After a moment, the sound stopped. She heard footsteps, the creak of floorboards, then silence. Adeline stared at the ceiling in the darkness, listening to her husband pace alone in his room, and wondered what she'd actually agreed to when she'd said, "I will." Not a marriage. Not really. A partnership, maybe. An alliance. Two broken people trying to build something functional from the wreckage of their separate disasters. She fell back asleep thinking about Cordelia's crimson dress and Rowan's haunted eyes, and didn't wake again until morning light streamed through the windows. Her second day as the Duchess of Blackmore had begun, and somehow it promised to be even more complicated than the first. The scandal broke 3 days later. Adeline was reviewing invoices in her new study when Mrs. Halloway appeared, her usually composed face pinched with anxiety. "Your Grace, you have callers, several of them." Adeline glanced at the clock. 10 in the morning, too early for social calls. "Who?" "Lady Pembroke, Mrs. Ashford Kent, the Countess of Harrington, and—" Mrs. Halloway hesitated. "Lady Cordelia Ashford." The pen slipped from Adeline's fingers, splattering ink across the ledger. She stared at the black stain spreading across the numbers she'd been carefully tallying. All of them? Together? They arrived within minutes of each other. Lady Cordelia came last. Mrs. Halloway's voice dropped. "Your Grace, they're in the drawing room, waiting." This wasn't a coincidence. Coordinated arrivals meant coordinated purpose, and Cordelia's presence meant nothing good. Adeline stood, smoothing her skirts. The deep green day dress was practical, unremarkable, not the armor she'd have chosen for whatever battle was about to unfold. "Is His Grace home?" "No, Your Grace. He left for Parliament an hour ago." Of course he had. Whatever was about to happen, she'd face it alone. "Send for tea," Adeline said. "And Mrs. Halloway, stay close." The older woman's expression shifted to something almost protective. "Yes, Your Grace." The drawing room was a study in calculated intimidation. Lady Pembroke, Margaret's future mother-in-law, sat ramrod straight in the best chair, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression glacial. Mrs. Ashford Kent, a notorious gossip, perched on the settee like a bird of prey. The Countess of Harrington, who'd hosted the ball where Rowan had proposed, studied her gloves with studied disinterest. And Cordelia stood by the window, resplendent in pale pink silk, looking like a cat who'd cornered a particularly interesting mouse. "Ladies," Adeline swept in with her chin high. What an unexpected pleasure. "Your Grace," Lady Pembroke's tone could have frozen brandy. "We won't waste your time with pleasantries. We're here about a matter of significant concern to all of us." Adeline sat, arranging her skirts with deliberate care. "I'm listening." Mrs. Ashford Kent leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "There are rumors circulating, Your Grace, about your marriage to the Duke." "How fascinating." "What sort of rumors?" "That it was arranged to settle your father's gambling debts," Lady Pembroke said bluntly. "That you trapped His Grace into marriage through financial manipulation." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Adeline's heart hammered, but she kept her face perfectly neutral. "And you believe these rumors?" "We believe," the Countess said quietly, "that where there's smoke, there's fire." Cordelia moved from the window, her smile sharp. "I told them it couldn't possibly be true, that the Duke would never be so mercenary. But then I remembered our conversation the other night, and I had to wonder." So this was her retaliation. Not a direct attack, but something more insidious, spreading poison through London's drawing rooms, turning Adeline's own honesty against her. "I'm curious," Adeline said. "Who started these rumors?" Silence. Guilty, damning silence. "Let me guess. Someone who perhaps felt slighted by His Grace's choice of bride. Someone who might have personal reasons for wanting to damage this marriage." Cordelia's smile never wavered. "Are you accusing me of something, Your Grace?" "I'm simply observing that timing is interesting. These rumors appear mere days after you visited my home uninvited and made several dramatic claims about your past with my husband. The timing," Lady Pembroke said icily, "is irrelevant. What matters is whether the claims are true." "Which claims specifically?" Adeline met the older woman's gaze. "That my father had debts? That's hardly secret. Half of London's aristocracy is mortgaged to the hilt. That the Duke and I arranged our marriage for practical reasons? We never claimed otherwise. That I somehow trapped him? She laughed, and it sounded genuinely amused. Have you met my husband, Lady Pembroke? The man who controls half the shipping in England? You truly believe he can be trapped by anyone? Mrs. Ashford Kent's eyes narrowed. Then why did he marry you? No offense, Your Grace, but you're not exactly the catch of the season. The word should have stung. Would have stung a month ago. But Adeline had already accepted her value in this transaction, had already made peace with being chosen for capability rather than beauty. He married me because I'm useful, she said calmly. I manage his household efficiently. I don't create scandals or demand romantic gestures he has no interest in providing. And I understand that marriage, particularly at our level, is a partnership based on mutual benefit rather than sentiment. How mercenary, Cordelia murmured. How honest. Adeline stood, forcing them to look up at her. Now, if we're finished with this inquisition, I have household accounts to review. We're not finished. Lady Pembroke's voice cracked like a whip. Your father's debts threaten to taint my family by association. My son is engaged to your sister. If these rumors continue, then you should consider the source of the rumors rather than their target. Adeline looked directly at Cordelia. Ask yourself who benefits from destroying my reputation. Who has the motive, the means, and the vindictive temperament to spread lies designed to hurt not just me, but the Duke himself? Cordelia's face went white, then red. You have no proof. Don't I? Adeline turned to Mrs. Ashford Kent. Who told you about my father's debts? Was it Lady Cordelia by chance? During perhaps a very concerned, very confidential conversation where she worried so much about the Duke's welfare? Mrs. Ashford Kent's expression shifted, caught. And you, Lady Pembroke, who suggested that my marriage might impact your son's engagement? Who planted that particular seed of doubt? The silence was absolute. Here's what I think happened, Adeline continued. Lady Cordelia, feeling slighted, decided to punish both the Duke and me by destroying our reputations. She gathered you here today hoping I'd either confirm the accusations through defensiveness or deny them through obvious lies. Either way, she wins. My credibility is destroyed, the Duke is humiliated, and she gets her revenge. This is ridiculous, Cordelia started. Is it? Then explain why you're here in my drawing room, participating in what amounts to an ambush against a woman you claim to barely know. Cordelia's mouth opened, closed. Her facade cracked visibly. Lady Pembroke stood, her expression shifting from hostile to thoughtful. Lady Cordelia, perhaps you should explain your interest in this matter. I have no interest beyond the fact that you were in love with my husband and he rejected you, Adeline said quietly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not my father's debts or the terms of my marriage. You can't stand that he chose someone else, so you're trying to destroy what he built. Cordelia's composure shattered. He loved me. He promised you nothing. The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Rowan stood there, still in his coat, his face a mask of cold fury. Your Grace, Lady Pembroke said, flustered. We didn't expect... Clearly. He walked into the room, his presence instantly dominating it. Mrs. Halloway sent word that my wife was entertaining unexpected guests. I came immediately. His eyes found Adeline's across the room, and something passed between them, recognition, solidarity, understanding. Rowan, Cordelia's voice trembled. I was simply trying to help. By spreading lies about my wife? He turned to her, and his voice was lethal. By manipulating these women into attacking her in her own home? I never lied, Cordelia said desperately. Everything I said was true. You implied she trapped me into marriage. That's a lie. He moved to stand beside Adeline, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. The contact felt deliberate, claiming. I pursued her. I proposed. I set the terms. She accepted them with full knowledge of what this marriage would be. A business arrangement, Mrs. Ashford Kent said faintly. A partnership. Rowan's tone brooked no argument. Based on mutual respect and clearly defined expectations, which is more than most society marriages can claim. Lady Pembroke cleared her throat. Your Grace, the The rumors about the debts are irrelevant. My wife's family circumstances don't impact our marriage or my standing. Anyone suggesting otherwise is welcome to take their concerns directly to me." He paused, letting that threat sink in. "I assume I won't be hearing from any of you again on this matter." "No, Your Grace," the Countess said quickly. "Of course not." Lady Pembroke stood stiffly. "We apologize for the intrusion. We were misinformed." She looked pointedly at Cordelia, who had gone sheet white. "I think you should all leave," Rowan said. "Except you, Cordelia. We need to talk." The other women practically fled. Adeline started to follow, but Rowan caught her wrist. "Stay," he said quietly. "Please." So she stayed, standing beside him as Cordelia faced them both, a united front she clearly hadn't expected. "I should have done this 3 years ago," Rowan said, "but I was young and stupid, and I thought letting you walk away gracefully would be kinder than the truth." "What truth?" Cordelia's voice broke. "That I never loved you. Not the way you wanted. I cared about you, yes, enjoyed your company. But love?" He shook his head. "I don't think I'm capable of that kind of feeling, Cordelia. I tried to tell you that when we ended things. You wouldn't listen. You just needed time. I needed honesty. With myself and with you." He glanced at Adeline. "My wife understands that. She doesn't expect me to be something I'm not." "Because she doesn't love you either," Cordelia said bitterly. "Exactly." Rowan's voice softened fractionally. "Which is why this marriage works. We're not pretending. We're not lying to each other or ourselves about grand romantic futures. We're building something practical, sustainable, real." Tears streaked Cordelia's carefully painted face. "I hate you." "I know, but you need to let this go. Move on. Find someone who can give you what you actually want." "What if what I want is you? Then you're wanting something that never existed." He released Adeline's wrist but stayed close. "You need to leave now, Cordelia. And you need to stop spreading lies about my wife. If you can't do that, we'll have a very different conversation involving my solicitors." Cordelia looked between them, Rowan's implacable face, Adeline's steady gaze, and something in her broke. She turned and fled, leaving a trail of rose perfume and ruined mascara. The door slammed. Silence descended. Adeline found herself shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Sit down," Rowan said, guiding her to a chair. "Before you fall down." She sat. He poured brandy from the sideboard, not wine, brandy, and pressed the glass into her hands. "Drink." She drank. The liquor burned, but it steadied her. "How much did you hear?" she asked. "Enough." He sat across from her, loosening his cravat. "Mrs. Holloway sent a footman to Parliament the moment those women arrived. She was worried. She was right to be." Adeline stared into the amber liquid. "They came here to destroy me, Rowan. All of them, but especially Cordelia. She wanted to prove I was unworthy of you." "You're not." The words were simple, factual, but they hit her like a physical blow. "I'm not aristocratic enough, not beautiful enough. Not you stood up to 4 women who came here specifically to intimidate you, and you didn't flinch." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You defended yourself, defended me, and exposed Cordelia's manipulation without losing your composure once. That's not unworthiness, Adeline, that's strength." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let those words sink in and heal something broken inside her. But 3 days ago, she'd been nobody, just a daughter sacrificing herself for her family. How could 3 days of being a duchess change that? "The rumors won't stop," she said. "Cordelia will keep spreading them. And even if she doesn't, people will talk. They'll say I married you for money, that our whole arrangement is sordid. Let them talk." He drained his own glass. "We know the truth. That's what matters." "Is it? What about your reputation, your political standing?" "We'll survive." He set down his glass with a decisive click. "You want to know something? Half of Parliament married for money or connections. The other half married for breeding rights. Romance is a luxury most of us can't afford. At least we're honest about it." "Honest and miserable." "Are you? Miserable?" The question caught her off guard. Was she? 3 days of marriage to a man who treated her like a colleague rather than a wife. 3 days of managing a household that resented her presence. 3 days of fighting battles she'd never asked to fight. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I knew what I was agreeing to. But this, the attacks, the scrutiny, Cordelia, it's harder than I expected. Would you take it back if you could? She thought about her sister's secure futures, her mother's relief, the family debts disappearing like morning fog. No, she said. I'd do it again, but I wouldn't have been so naive about the cost. Something crossed his face. Regret? Maybe. Or guilt. I should have warned you better about Cordelia, about society, about all of it. Would that have changed anything? Probably not. He stood, pacing to the window. But you deserve to know what you were walking into. I'm a grown woman, Rowan. I made my choice. A choice I forced on you by making it the only viable option. The honesty of that admission startled her. He was acknowledging his role in her lack of alternatives, not apologizing exactly, but recognizing it. You didn't force me, she said carefully. You made an offer. I accepted. Everything after that is on both of us. He turned from the window, studying her. You really believe that? I have to. The alternative is accepting that I'm a victim, and I refuse to be that. Even when people like Cordelia try to make you one? Especially then. She stood, setting down the empty brandy glass. I won't let her win, Rowan. I won't let her turn me into some pathetic creature who married above her station and can't handle the pressure. Then what will you do? The question hung between them, a challenge and an invitation. Adeline thought about the women who'd invaded her home, about Cordelia's spiteful manipulation, about the whispers that would follow her through every ballroom, every dinner party, every public appearance for years to come. She thought about being invisible at balls while her sisters shone, about managing her father's disasters, about sacrificing her own future to save theirs. She'd spent her whole life making herself smaller, quieter, less threatening so other people could shine. She was done with that. I'm going to become exactly what you hired me to be, she said. The best Duchess London has ever seen. So competent, so capable, so obviously valuable that no one can question why you chose me. That's a tall order. I don't care. Her voice hardened. They want to call this marriage a scandal? Fine. We'll make it the most successful scandal in history. A slow smile spread across Rowan's face, genuine, appreciative, almost proud. You're terrifying when you're determined. Good. I'm tired of being underestimated. He crossed the room, stopping close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. For what it's worth, I never underestimated you. From the moment I saw you in that ballroom, standing in the shadows while everyone else competed for attention, I knew you were different. Different how? Smart enough to see the game, strong enough to play it, he paused, and brave enough to make the hard choice when it mattered. The compliment settled over her like a warm cloak. She'd been called many things, dutiful, practical, responsible, but never brave. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming home, for standing with me against them. We're partners, remember? That means fighting each other's battles. Even against former lovers? Especially against former lovers. His mouth quirked. Though I'd prefer if we could go a few weeks without anyone from my past showing up to cause problems. I'll make a note. No more surprise visitors from Rowan's romantic history. I don't have a romantic history. I have Cordelia, and she was a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Not everyone marries them. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a surprisingly gentle gesture from a man who operated almost entirely through cold logic. You should rest. Today was exhausting. I still have accounts to review. They'll keep. He guided her toward the door. You've already fought off an ambush and exposed a conspiracy. I think you've earned an afternoon off. She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like gravity. Will you be home for dinner? Yes. And Adeline? He waited until she looked back. What you said to them today, about our marriage being a partnership based on mutual respect. I meant it when I agreed. I know. Do you? He tilted his head, studying her. Because sometimes I think you're waiting for me to prove I'm exactly what Cordelia claimed. Cold, incapable of caring, using you like a convenient tool. Aren't you? The question came out before she could stop it. Blunt, challenging, slightly cruel. He didn't flinch. Maybe. but I'm trying not to be." That admission, small, fragile, utterly unexpected, cracked something in her chest. "That's more than most men would admit," she said. "Most men are cowards." He smiled faintly. "I'm trying to be honest instead." "How's that working out?" "Ask me in a year." She left him there and retreated to her rooms where exhaustion finally claimed her. She slept hard, dreamlessly, and woke 3 hours later to find dusk settling over London. A note waited on her bedside table in Rowan's precise handwriting. "Dinner at 7. We're hosting the Ashford Kents and the Pembrokes. Time to prove you're not someone they can destroy." Her stomach dropped. Tonight. He wanted to face them again tonight. Then determination hardened into resolve. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one. But she'd fight on her terms, not theirs. At precisely 7 o'clock, Adeline descended the stairs in a gown that had cost more than her family's monthly food budget. Deep sapphire silk that made her eyes look stormy, with a neckline that was just barely proper and a fit that suggested very clearly that the new Duchess of Blackmore was nobody's victim. She found Rowan waiting in the entrance hall. He looked her over slowly, his expression unreadable. "Well?" she asked. "They're going to hate you." "Good." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Remember, we're partners. I've got your back. And I've got yours." The guests arrived in a flurry of nervous energy. Mrs. Ashford Kent clutched her husband's arm like a drowning woman. Lady Pembroke entered with her chin high, but her eyes wary. Dinner was a masterclass in controlled warfare. Adeline played the perfect Duchess. Gracious, poised, utterly unshakable. She asked after their families, discussed politics with intelligence, and never once mentioned the morning's confrontation. But beneath the polite conversation ran a current of power. Every smile was calculated, every comment precisely weighted. She was showing them exactly what they'd tried to destroy, and proving it was indestructible. By the time dessert arrived, Lady Pembroke was actually smiling. "Your Grace," she said carefully, "I owe you an apology. For this morning, I was misled." "We were all misled," Adeline said smoothly, "by someone who had reasons to want us divided." "Lady Cordelia won't be welcome in my home again," Mrs. Ashford Kent announced. "I won't be party to such manipulation." Victory tasted sweeter than the chocolate torte in front of her. After the guests departed, subdued but clearly impressed, Rowan found her on the terrace, breathing in the cold night air. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was strategic." "Same thing." He leaned against the railing beside her. "You've made allies out of potential enemies. That's no small feat." "They're not allies. They're neutralized threats. There's a difference." Spoken like a true politician's wife. She laughed, genuine, surprised. "Is that what I am now?" "Among other things." He looked at her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "You're surviving this, Adeline. Better than surviving. You're thriving. Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not. I knew you would." He paused. "I just didn't expect to enjoy watching it so much." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. This was dangerous territory, the space between partnership and something more, something neither of them had agreed to want. "Rowan?" "Your Grace." A footman burst onto the terrace, his face pale. "Forgive me, but there's an emergency. It's your father." Adeline's blood turned to ice. "What happened?" "He's here. At the servants' entrance. The footman swallowed hard. "Bleeding, Your Grace. And he says men are following him." She ran. Propriety be damned, she lifted her skirts and ran through the house to the servants' entrance, where her father slumped against the doorframe, his face battered, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Papa!" He looked up, his eyes unfocused. "Adeline, they found me. They found—" He collapsed. Rowan caught him, lowering him carefully to the ground. "Get the physician, now!" As servants scattered, Adeline knelt beside her father, pressing a handkerchief to his bleeding head. "Who did this? Who found you?" "The creditors," Charles mumbled. "The ones I owed before. They heard about the wedding. Thought I had money now. When I couldn't pay—" "You told them your debts were settled," Rowan said sharply. "I paid every creditor on the list you provided." "Not all of them." Charles's eyes filled with tears. "There were others. Private debts, gambling debts I didn't want you to know about." Adeline's hands stilled. How much? 20,000 pounds. The number landed like a bomb. 20,000. On top of the 16 Rowan had already paid. You lied to me, she whispered. You let me marry him thinking the debts were 16,000 when it was actually 36? I thought I could handle it. Thought I could pay them off quietly. By doing what? Gambling more? Her voice rose. How could you do this? How could you put us all at risk again? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't help. She stood, backing away from him. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't make the men who beat you disappear. Rowan caught her arm. Adeline, breathe. Don't tell me to breathe. My father lied. He's brought dangerous men to our door, to your door, all because he couldn't control himself for 5 minutes. I know, but falling apart won't solve it. She wanted to scream. Wanted to break something. Wanted to grab her father and shake him until he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. Instead, she stood there trembling while the physician arrived and began tending to Charles's wounds. We need to handle the creditors, Rowan said quietly, before this becomes a bigger problem. How? You've already paid 16,000. I can't ask you to pay more. You're not asking. I'm offering. He turned her to face him. But Adeline, this is the last time. If your father does this again, he's on his own. I understand. Do you? Because I need to know you're with me on this, that we're making this decision together. She looked at her father, broken and bleeding on their floor, then at Rowan, steady and sure beside her. We pay the debts, she said, all of them. And then my father is cut off, completely. No more access to our money, our home, or our protection. Adeline, no, Charles protested weakly. Yes. She didn't look at him. You've had your last rescue, Papa. From now on, your problems are yours alone. The physician looked up. He'll need rest, and someone should stay with him tonight in case of concussion. He can stay in the guest wing, Rowan said, but only tonight. As they helped Charles up the stairs, Adeline felt the weight of betrayal settling over her shoulders like a shroud. She'd sacrificed everything for her family, and they'd repaid her with lies. Later, after her father was settled and the house had fallen silent, she found Rowan in his study. 20,000 pounds, she said from the doorway. On top of 16, that's 36,000 reasons my father's creditors might come after us. Not if we pay them first. And if there are more debts he hasn't told us about, then we deal with those too. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, offering her one. But we set boundaries, clear, unbreakable boundaries. She took the glass, sinking into the chair across from his desk. I'm sorry for all of this, for dragging you into my family's disaster. You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked in with my eyes open. He raised his glass. To family, and all the ways they complicate our lives. She couldn't help it. She laughed, even though nothing was funny. Is this what partnership looks like? Constantly cleaning up each other's catastrophes? Probably. He smiled faintly. Though I promise my catastrophes are usually less violent. Just former lovers appearing at dinner. Exactly. Much more civilized. They drank in companionable silence, the weight of the day finally settling. Adeline, Rowan said after a while, what you did today, standing up to those women, making allies of enemies, handling your father's crisis without falling apart, that's not just competence, that's courage. I don't feel courageous, I feel exhausted. Same thing, usually. He leaned forward. But you should know, I'm proud of you, of how you've handled all of this. The words shouldn't have mattered. This was a business arrangement. His pride shouldn't mean anything. But it did. It mattered more than she wanted to admit. Thank you, she whispered. Outside, London's night sounds continued. Carriages, laughter, the endless churn of life. Inside, 2 people who'd married for all the wrong reasons sat together in the darkness, finding something that looked almost like trust. And somewhere in the city, creditors were counting money they thought they were owed, planning their next move against a Duchess who'd already survived 1 war and wasn't about to lose another. The creditors arrived at noon the next day. Adeline was in the small study reviewing household accounts when Mrs. Halloway appeared, her face tight with concern. Your Grace, there are 3 men at the door. They're asking for Mr. Harrow. Tell them he's indisposed. Adeline didn't look up from the ledger. And not receiving visitors. They said if he won't see them, they'll speak to the Duke, or to you. Mrs. Halloway's voice dropped. They're not leaving, Your Grace. Adeline set down her pen carefully. She'd known this was coming, had spent half the night preparing for it, but knowing and facing were different things entirely. Where's His Grace? Still at Parliament. The session runs late today. Of course it did. This would fall to her then. Show them to the blue parlor. The small one, not the formal receiving room. She stood, smoothing her skirts. And Mrs. Halloway? Have 2 footmen positioned outside the door, just in case. You're not going to face them alone? I'm the Duchess of Blackmore. Adeline's voice was steadier than she felt. They came to my house making demands. The least I can do is hear them out. The 3 men waiting in the blue parlor looked exactly like what they were. Hired muscle, dressed in cheap suits trying to pass for legitimate businessmen. The leader, a bull-necked man with scarred knuckles, stood when she entered, though the gesture felt more threatening than respectful. Your Grace. His accent was East End, rough. Pleasure to meet you. I doubt that. Adeline sat, forcing them to remain standing. You're here about my father's debts. Smart woman. Bullneck smiled, showing yellowed teeth. Your father owes our employer £20,000, plus interest. How much interest? $5,000, compounded weekly since the original loan. $25,000 total then, even more than her father had admitted. And who exactly is your employer? A private gentleman who prefers discretion. How convenient. She folded her hands in her lap. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to provide me with detailed documentation of these debts, the original loan agreements, payment schedules, interest calculations, everything. I'll have my solicitors review them. If they're legitimate, we'll discuss payment. Bullneck's smile disappeared. We don't have time for solicitors and discussions. We want payment now. Then you'll be disappointed. Adeline met his gaze without flinching. I'm not handing over £25,000 based on the word of 3 men who won't even name their employer. Your father already confirmed the debt. My father is a compulsive gambler with a head injury. His confirmation means nothing. She stood. Bring me documentation. Real documentation, not forged receipts. Then we'll talk. The man to Bullneck's left, thin, weasel-faced, stepped forward. You think you can dismiss us like servants? We know where you live now, Your Grace. We know your routine. Be a shame if something happened to that pretty carriage of yours. The threat hung in the air like poison. Adeline's heart hammered, but she kept her voice level. Are you threatening me in my own home? Just stating facts. Weaselface grinned. Accidents happen all the time in London. They do. The voice came from the doorway. Rowan stood there, still in his coat, his face carved from ice. Particularly to men who threatened duchesses. The 3 men spun around. Bullneck's hand moved toward his coat, toward a weapon probably, but Rowan was faster. He crossed the room in 3 strides and caught the man's wrist, twisting it behind his back with brutal efficiency. I wouldn't. Rowan's voice was conversational. Not with 2 footmen and a constable standing outside that door. Constable? Bullneck's face went pale. I sent for him the moment my housekeeper informed me of your arrival. Rowan released the man with a shove. Now, my wife made you a reasonable offer. Documentation in exchange for consideration of payment. I suggest you accept it before I have you arrested for trespassing and extortion. Weaselface sneered. You can't arrest us for collecting legitimate debts. Can't I? This is a private residence. You entered without invitation, made threats against its occupants, and refused to leave when asked. That's trespassing at minimum. The threats make it extortion. Rowan smiled, cold and sharp. I have excellent solicitors. They'd love the practice. The 3rd man, older, quieter, put a hand on Bullneck's arm. We'll get the documentation. Wise. Rowan moved to stand beside Adeline, a united front. You have 1 week. Send it through proper channels. My solicitor's office, not my home. If I see any of you on my property again without invitation, I'll have you prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Bullneck looked like he wanted to argue, but the older man was already steering him toward the door. 1 week, Your Grace. Then we'll expect payment. You'll expect negotiation? Adeline corrected. Payment depends entirely on the legitimacy of your claims. They left, threats and bluster trailing behind them like cheap cologne. The moment the front door closed, Adeline's knees gave out. She caught herself on the chair, breathing hard. Hey, Rowan's hand steadied her elbow. You're all right. They're gone. They threatened me. In our home. I know. His jaw was tight. They won't get the chance again. How did you know to come back? Mrs. Halloway sent a footman to Parliament the second those men arrived. I left immediately. He guided her back into the chair. What possessed you to face them alone? You weren't here, and I'm not helpless. No one said you were helpless, but you're also not equipped to handle violent criminals. Neither are you, apparently. Or did you forget the part where one of them went for a weapon? He had the grace to look sheepish. I may have acted before thinking. You think? She laughed, slightly hysterical, but genuine. You could have been shot, Rowan, over my father's gambling debts. Our father's debts now. He crouched beside her chair, bringing them eye to eye. We're married, remember? Your problems are my problems. That's not how this was supposed to work. How is it supposed to work? You handle everything alone while I ignore it? He shook his head. That's not a partnership, Adeline. That's you sacrificing yourself all over again. The observation hit too close to home. She looked away, blinking against sudden tears. I don't know how to let people help me, she admitted quietly. I've been fixing things on my own for so long, I don't remember how to do it any other way. Then we'll figure it out together. He stood, offering his hand. Starting with your father's creditors. We're going to end this, Adeline, properly. No more threats, no more violence, no more midnight visits from criminals. How? By being smarter than they are. His smile turned calculating. They think they're dealing with a weak gambler and his desperate daughter. They're about to discover they've picked a fight with a duke who controls half of London's lending market. Over the next week, Rowan moved with surgical precision. He had his solicitors pull records on every major criminal lending operation in London, cross-referenced names, routes, patterns. Within 3 days, they'd identified the private gentleman behind the loan. Marcus Trent, a wealthy merchant with legitimate businesses serving as fronts for illegal lending. He's careful, Rowan explained over dinner, spreading documents across the table. Uses intermediaries, keeps his hands clean, but he's also greedy. Look at this interest rate, 40% compounded weekly. That's unconscionable even by criminal standards. Adeline studied the papers. Is it enforceable? Legally? No, these contracts are predatory. Any judge would throw them out. He paused. But Trent doesn't use judges. He uses fear. So what do? We make him more afraid of us than we are of him. The plan was audacious, possibly reckless, and entirely dependent on Rowan's political connections. He called in favors from magistrates, had quiet words with police commissioners, and arranged for several of Trent's other operations to face sudden, unexpected scrutiny. Within 4 days, 2 of Trent's warehouses were raided for smuggling. 3 of his ships were held in port for inspection. His legitimate businesses found themselves tangled in regulatory reviews that would take months to resolve. You're strangling his cash flow, Adeline realized. I'm applying pressure. Rowan sipped his wine. Every hour his operations are frozen costs him money. Eventually, he'll want to negotiate. And if he doesn't, then I keep squeezing until he breaks. Trent requested a meeting on day 6. It took place at Rowan's club, neutral ground, public enough to prevent violence, but private enough for frank discussion. Adeline insisted on attending despite Rowan's protests. This is business, she said firmly. Our business. I'm not sitting home waiting to hear what men decided about my life. So they went together, presenting a united front that clearly unsettled Marcus Trent from the moment they entered the private room. Trent was younger than Adeline expected. Mid-40s, well-dressed, with the kind of smooth charm that probably made people trust him right before he destroyed them. Your Grace, he bowed to Rowan, then to Adeline. Your Grace, thank you for agreeing to meet. We haven't agreed to anything yet, Rowan said, except to hear what you have to say. Trent sat, spreading his own documents on the table. Your father-in-law owes me £20,000. I have the contracts. Illegal contracts, Adeline interrupted. with predatory interest rates that no court would enforce, which is why we don't use courts. Trent's smile was cold. We use other methods. Methods that are currently costing you considerably more than 20,000 pounds, Rowan said. How many ships did you have frozen today? 4? Trent's jaw tightened. You're overstepping, Your Grace. Am I? You sent armed men to threaten my wife in our home. I'd say I'm showing remarkable restraint. Rowan leaned back. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forgive my father-in-law's debt. All of it, including your imaginary interest. Absolutely not. In exchange, Rowan continued, as if Trent hadn't spoken, I'll release the holds on your operations and ensure no further regulatory scrutiny. Your businesses can resume normal operations. That's extortion. No, that's negotiation. Adeline kept her voice pleasant. Extortion would be if we demanded payment from you. We're simply offering to stop inconveniencing you in exchange for you releasing an unenforceable debt. Trent looked between them, clearly recalculating. Even if I agreed, what's to stop your father from gambling himself into debt again? From coming to me again? He won't. Adeline's voice hardened. Because if he does, he'll be entirely on his own. No rescue, no intervention. Whatever consequences he faces will be his to endure. You'd abandon your own father? I'd protect my family by removing a destructive element. She met Trent's gaze steadily. My father has had his last rescue. This is it. After this, he's cut off completely from our finances and our protection. Something shifted in Trent's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You mean that? Every word. He studied them for a long moment, then gathered his papers. Fine. The debt is forgiven, but if he comes to me again, he won't, Rowan said. And if he does, you're welcome to refuse him. We certainly will. After Trent left, Adeline sank into her chair, the adrenaline draining away. We did it, she said wonderingly. We actually did it. You did it. Rowan poured them both brandy. The part about cutting your father off, that was brilliant. It's the only thing that would have convinced Trent we were serious. I am serious. She took the glass, her hand steady now. I can't keep sacrificing everything for a man who won't help himself. At some point, I have to choose my own survival. That's not selfish, that's necessary. Tell that to my mother when she finds out. I will. He raised his glass. To necessary choices. And to the woman brave enough to make them. They drank, and for the first time since the wedding, Adeline felt something like hope. The confrontation with her family came that evening. Charles had recovered enough to leave his bed, and Eleanor had arrived at Blackmore House demanding to see her daughter. They sat in the formal drawing room, her parents on one side, Adeline and Rowan on the other, like opposing armies preparing for battle. You can't cut him off, Eleanor said, her voice shrill. He's your father, Adeline. Family doesn't abandon family. Family also doesn't lie about 36,000 pounds in debt, Adeline replied. Or bring violent criminals to their daughter's doorstep. Charles flinched. I never meant for them to come here, but they did. Because you gambled money you didn't have, made promises you couldn't keep, and then hid behind me to fix it. She stood, unable to sit still any longer. I've fixed your disasters for 3 years, Papa. I've sold grandmother's jewelry. I've dismissed servants I cared about. I've watched Margaret and Josephine's futures hang in the balance while you threw money away on cards and horses and whatever other vice struck your fancy. Adeline, I married a stranger to save you. Her voice cracked. I sold my entire future because you couldn't control yourself, and your response was to lie about how bad it really was and accumulate even more debt. Silence. Eleanor's face had gone white. I didn't know about the additional debts, she whispered. Because he didn't tell you, just like he didn't tell me. Adeline looked at her father, who couldn't meet her eyes. I'm done, Papa. I'm done cleaning up your messes. I'm done sacrificing myself while you learn nothing and change nothing. So what? Charles's voice was bitter. You're rich now, married to a duke. You don't need us anymore. This isn't about need, it's about self-preservation. She glanced at Rowan, who gave a small nod of support. You're cut off from our finances completely. No more loans, no more bailouts, no more using my marriage as collateral for your schemes. You can't do that. I can. I have. She drew a breath. You're still welcome at family dinners. Margaret and Josephine are still my sisters, but your financial disasters are yours alone from now on. Eleanor stood, trembling. You're cruel, just like him. She gestured at Rowan. He's turned you into someone cold and heartless. No, Adeline said quietly. He's helped me become someone strong enough to say no. There's a difference. Her mother left in tears. Her father followed, his shoulders bowed. After they'd gone, Adeline stood at the window watching their carriage disappear into the London night. That was harder than facing Trent, she said. I know. Rowan joined her at the window. But necessary. Will they ever forgive me? Does it matter? She thought about that. About years of putting her parents' needs above her own. About sacrificing her future, her dreams, her entire identity to keep the Harrow family afloat. No, she realized. It doesn't. I need to forgive myself first. His hand found hers in the darkness, warm, solid, real. You're allowed to choose yourself, Adeline. You're allowed to survive. She turned to look at him, this man who'd been a stranger 4 weeks ago and was now her closest ally. When did this stop being just a business arrangement? I'm not sure it ever was. Not really. He smiled, self-deprecating. I told myself I wanted competence and efficiency. But I think what I actually wanted was someone who understood that survival sometimes means making brutal choices. Is that what we're doing? Surviving? Maybe. Or maybe we're building something that looks like survival but feels like more. Her heart stuttered. Rowan, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know the terms we agreed to. I'm just saying this partnership works. You and me facing the world together. It works better than I expected. Better than a cold, loveless arrangement? Better than anything I hoped for. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You're extraordinary, Adeline. The way you handled Cordelia, the creditors, your family, you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified most of the time. Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. But you don't let it stop you. That's what makes you extraordinary. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. This was the edge of something neither had agreed to want. We should maintain boundaries, she said, but her voice was uncertain. Why? Because this was supposed to be practical, strategic. It still is. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle, despite the calluses. But practical doesn't mean cold. Strategic doesn't mean emotionless. What are you saying? I'm saying I like you, Adeline Blackmore. I respect you. I enjoy your company. He paused. And I'm tired of pretending this is just business. Her breath caught. What if it gets complicated? It's already complicated. We're married, fighting your father's creditors, navigating society gossip, and somehow becoming friends despite ourselves. He smiled. Adding honesty about how we feel can't make it more complicated than it already is. How do you feel? Like I won the lottery when I chose you. His voice was raw, honest. Like I got far more than I deserved or expected. Like somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, I found something I didn't know I was missing. Tears pricked her eyes. This wasn't part of the agreement. I know, but agreements can be amended. He brushed his thumb across her cheek. What do you want, Adeline? Not what you agreed to. Not what's practical. What do you actually want? She thought about the cold calculation of their wedding, the careful distance they'd maintained, the way she'd told herself this would never be more than a useful partnership. Then she thought about him coming home when she'd faced the creditors, standing beside her against Cordelia, defending her to her own parents, being proud of her strength instead of threatened by it. I want to try, she whispered, to be more than partners, to be... She couldn't say the word. Friends? He supplied. Friends, and maybe, eventually, more. His smile was incandescent. I can work with eventually. He kissed her then, soft, careful, nothing like the perfunctory brush of lips at their wedding. This was a question, an invitation, a promise of something tentative and new. When he pulled back, she was breathless. That was against the rules? He grinned. Probably. I was going to say unexpected, Good unexpected or bad unexpected? I'll let you know. But she was smiling, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. This doesn't change the fundamentals. We're still a practical match, still a strategic partnership. Absolutely. With occasional benefits. Occasional? Frequent benefits? He laughed at her expression. We'll negotiate the terms. 2 weeks later, Lady Pembroke hosted a ball. Adeline almost declined the invitation. The memory of the last ball, where Rowan had proposed, still felt too raw. But Margaret was being formally introduced to society, and missing her sister's debut was unthinkable. So she put on her most expensive gown, midnight blue silk with diamonds at her throat, and let Rowan escort her into the ballroom like she belonged there. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped, heads turned. The Duchess of Blackmore had arrived, and everyone wanted to see what she'd do next. "They're staring," Adeline murmured. "Let them." Rowan's hand was firm on her back. "You're magnificent. Give them something to stare at." So she did. She smiled at Lady Pembroke, greeted Mrs. Ashford Kent warmly, made conversation with the Countess of Harrington about upcoming charity events. She was polite, poised, utterly unshakable. And when Cordelia appeared across the ballroom, resplendent in scarlet, Adeline simply nodded acknowledgement and turned away. The cut was subtle but unmistakable. She wasn't afraid of Cordelia anymore. Wasn't threatened or intimidated. She'd won. "May I have this dance?" Rowan asked as the orchestra struck up a waltz. "You may." He led her onto the floor, and unlike their first dance, cold, transactional, performing for strangers, this one was different. His hand was warm on her waist. His smile was genuine. When he looked at her, she saw not a business partner, but a man who actually cared. "You're enjoying this," she accused. "Immensely. Watching you conquer society is better than theater." "I'm not conquering anything. I'm just surviving." "Same thing." He spun her through a turn. "Look around, Adeline." "Really look." She did. Saw Lady Pembroke nodding approval. Saw other couples watching them with something like envy. Saw Margaret dancing with Lord Pembroke's son, radiant and happy, her future secure because of what Adeline had sacrificed. No, not sacrificed. Chosen. She'd chosen this path. Chosen strength over victimhood. Chosen partnership over loneliness. Chosen to fight rather than surrender. And somehow, in the midst of all that choosing, she'd found something unexpected. Not love. Not yet. But the possibility of it. The foundation of it. The beginning of something that might eventually become more than either of them had dared to hope for. "I think I'm glad I married you," she said. Rowan's eyes widened. "You think?" "I'm 90% sure." "I'll take 90%. He pulled her slightly closer, still proper but warmer than before. "Though I'm working on getting you to 100. How's that going? Ask me in a year." She laughed, genuine, joyful, free. Around them the ball continued. Music swirled. Couples danced. London's elite celebrated their certainties. But in the middle of it all, a forgotten daughter who'd sold herself to save her family had become something she'd never expected. A duchess who commanded respect, a wife who was becoming a partner, and a woman who was finally learning to choose herself. The song ended. Rowan bowed. Adeline curtsied. And when she looked up, she saw recognition in the eyes watching them. Not pity, not mockery. Respect. She'd earned it. Through battles fought and won, through strength shown and boundaries defended, through choosing survival over surrender again and again, the Duchess of Blackmore had arrived, and London had no choice but to acknowledge it. Winter arrived early that year, sweeping across London with a vengeance that froze the Thames and turned the city into something from a storybook. Adeline watched the snow fall from her study window, a cup of tea warming her hands, and thought about how much had changed in 3 months. 3 months since she'd married a stranger. 3 months since she'd stopped being invisible. "You're brooding again." She turned. Rowan leaned against the doorframe, still in his riding clothes, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. "I'm thinking." "Same thing with you." He crossed to her, pressing a kiss to her temple. Casual now, these small intimacies they'd started allowing themselves. "What about?" "Everything. Nothing." She gestured at the snow. "It's beautiful." "It's freezing. The roads will be impassable by tonight." He glanced at the papers on her desk. Still reviewing the charity budget? Someone has to. The orphanage applications alone are overwhelming. Since taking over management of the Blackmore Charitable Trust, Adeline had discovered a talent for identifying which organizations actually helped people versus which simply enriched their administrators. She'd cut funding to 3 established societies and redirected the money to smaller operations doing real work. The established societies had complained loudly. Rowan had told them to take it up with his Duchess. None of them had. "You're enjoying this," he observed. "Having power to actually help people?" "Yes." She set down her tea. "Is that wrong?" "It's honest. I like that about you." A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Halloway entered, her expression troubled. "Your Grace, you have a visitor. She says it's urgent." "Who?" "Lady Cordelia Ashford." The name landed like a stone in still water. Adeline and Rowan exchanged glances. "I thought we were done with her," Adeline said. "Apparently not." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Tell her. I'll see her." Adeline stood. "Whatever she wants, I'd rather know than wonder." "Adeline? It's fine. She can't hurt me anymore." She smiled at his concerned expression. "Trust me." Cordelia waited in the blue parlor, the same room where the creditors had made their threats. She looked different than she had at the ball. Older somehow, less polished. Her dress was expensive, but not new, her hair styled, but without its usual perfection. "Your Grace." Cordelia stood when Adeline entered. "Thank you for seeing me." "I almost didn't." Adeline sat, not offering refreshments. "What do you want, Cordelia?" "To apologize." That was unexpected. Adeline studied the other woman carefully, looking for the trap. "For what, specifically?" "For everything. The ambush with those women, the rumors, trying to destroy your marriage because I couldn't accept that Rowan had moved on." Cordelia's voice wavered. "I was cruel and vindictive and wrong." "Yes, you were." Adeline kept her tone neutral. "What changed?" Cordelia laughed bitterly. "I got engaged. To a man who actually wants me, not some fantasy of who he thinks I should be. And I realized," she paused, gathering herself. "I realized I'd spent 3 years hating Rowan for not being something he never claimed to be, for not loving me the way I wanted to be loved. And now? Now I'm marrying someone who does. Someone who sees me as I am and likes what he sees." She met Adeline's gaze. "The way Rowan looks at you." "Rowan and I have an arrangement." "No, you have a marriage." Cordelia's smile was sad. "I saw you dancing at the Pembroke ball. The way he watched you. That's not arrangement, Your Grace. That's something real." Adeline's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to maintain the fiction that this was still just a practical partnership. But Cordelia was right. Somewhere between fighting creditors and setting boundaries and learning to trust each other, she and Rowan had built something that looked like the beginnings of actual feeling. "Why are you really here?" Adeline asked. "Because I'm getting married in the spring, and I don't want to start my new life carrying this hatred. It's exhausting, holding on to grudges. And it's pointless." Cordelia stood. "I can't undo what I did, but I can acknowledge it was wrong and ask for your forgiveness." "Do you deserve it?" "Probably not, but I'm asking anyway." Adeline considered her, this woman who'd tried to destroy her marriage, who'd weaponized gossip and manipulation, who'd come to her home specifically to make her feel small and unwanted. She could refuse forgiveness, could hold this grudge forever, let it poison every interaction, every thought, or she could let it go. "I forgive you," Adeline said. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Cordelia's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "But Cordelia?" Adeline stood, meeting her gaze squarely. "If you ever come after my family again, my marriage, my sisters, anyone I care about, I won't be merciful. Am I clear?" "Perfectly." Cordelia moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think he chose well. Better than he knew." After she left, Adeline stood in the silent parlor, feeling something shift inside her chest. The weight of that particular battle finally lifted. Rowan found her there 10 minutes later. "Well," she apologized, "and I forgave her." His eyebrows rose. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Adeline turned to face him. She's getting married, starting over. I decided I'd rather let go than hold on to anger that only hurts me. That's very mature of you. Or very tired. She smiled. I'm done fighting battles that don't matter. I'd rather save my energy for ones that do. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms, another intimacy that had become natural over the past weeks. She leaned into him, breathing in his scent, wool and winter air, and something distinctly him. You're remarkable, he murmured against her hair. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She pulled back to look at him. Cordelia said something about the way you look at me. What about it? She said it was real, that we had a marriage, not an arrangement. His expression shifted, became guarded. What do you think? I think... She hesitated, fear and hope warring in her chest. I think somewhere along the way, this stopped being about survival and started being about something more. Is that a problem? I don't know, is it? He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. 3 months ago, I married you because I needed a Duchess. Someone competent and practical who wouldn't expect things I couldn't give. And now? Now I'm terrified because somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, I started caring about you, about us, about building something that matters more than strategy or convenience. Her heart hammered. That wasn't part of the agreement. I know, but the best things never are. He searched her face. What do you want, Adeline? Really want? She thought about the girl who'd stood invisible in ballrooms while her sisters shone, about the woman who'd sold herself to save her family, about the Duchess who'd learned to fight for herself instead of always sacrificing for others. I want this to be real, she whispered. Not just practical, not just strategic, real. It already is. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. It's been real since you faced down those creditors without flinching. Since you set boundaries with your father, since you walked into that ball like you owned it. When did you know that I was falling for you? He laughed softly. Probably the first night when you called our marriage a transaction and didn't apologize for it. You were so brutally honest. I'd never met anyone like that. I thought you wanted competence. I wanted safety, someone who wouldn't demand parts of me I couldn't give. He pulled her closer. But you made me want to try, to be more than just cold and practical, to build something worth having. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm scared. Of what? That I'll mess this up, that I'm not enough, that you'll wake up one day and realize you could have had someone better. Stop. His voice was firm. There is no one better. You're brilliant and strong and capable of things that terrify me. You're exactly what I need and more than I deserve. Rowan, I love you. The words came out rough, unpracticed, like he'd never said them before and wasn't sure how they'd land. I didn't mean to. Didn't plan for it. But I love you, Adeline, and I'm tired of pretending this is just business. The declaration hung between them, fragile and enormous. You don't have to say it back, he added quickly. I know this is sudden. I just needed you to know I love you too. The words burst out, surprising her as much as him. I've been trying not to, telling myself it was just gratitude or partnership or anything except feelings. But I love you, completely, inconveniently, terrifyingly. His smile was incandescent. Terrifyingly? You're a duke. You could have anyone, and somehow you chose me. You chose me back. That's what matters. He kissed her then, deep, searching, full of promise. We're going to make mistakes, fight, drive each other crazy. Probably. But we'll do it together, as partners, as... He hesitated, looking almost shy. As people who love each other. I can work with that. They stood there in the blue parlor, snow falling outside, London frozen and beautiful beyond the windows. Two people who'd started as strangers become allies and somehow found their way to something neither had believed possible. Love. The winter social season brought new challenges. Rowan's political work intensified, requiring Adeline to host dinners for ministers and diplomats who expected perfection and gave nothing in return. She navigated it all with the same competence she'd brought to household management, turning Blackmore House into a political salon where deals were made and alliances forged. You're better at this than I am, Rowan admitted after one particularly successful dinner. I'm just organized. You're strategic. You knew exactly where to seat everyone to facilitate the conversations I needed. He pulled her into his study, closing the door on the departing guests. The trade minister practically agreed to our terms before dessert. Because I seated him next to Lord Ashford, who's been his friend for 30 years, sometimes politics is just knowing who trusts whom. See? Strategic. He kissed her, tasting of wine and satisfaction. Have I mentioned I'm glad I married you? Once or twice, though I'm always open to hearing it again. Their relationship deepened through the winter. Not smoothly. They still fought, still disagreed, still had moments where the differences between them felt insurmountable. But they learned to navigate conflict together, to argue without destroying, to disagree while still respecting each other. And slowly, the marriage that had started as a transaction became something that looked like partnership, like friendship, like love. The crisis came in February. Adeline was reviewing charity applications when Mrs. Halloway appeared, her face pale. "Your Grace, your father is here. He's asking to see you." Adeline's stomach dropped. She hadn't seen Charles since cutting him off 3 months ago. Hadn't spoken to him despite his letters begging for reconciliation. "Show him to the morning room. And Mrs. Halloway? Stay close." Charles looked terrible. Thinner than she remembered, his face haggard, his clothes shabby. He stood when she entered, his hands twisting his hat. "Adeline, thank you for seeing me." "I almost didn't." She sat, not inviting him to do the same. "What do you want?" "To apologize, to explain." "There's nothing to explain. You lied about your debts, brought criminals to my home, and refused to take responsibility for your actions." I know all of that." He sank into a chair uninvited. "I've been getting help. There's a doctor who treats gambling compulsion. I've been seeing him twice weekly." That was unexpected. "For how long?" 6 weeks. He struggled with the words. "It's harder than I thought. Admitting I have a problem, that I can't control it on my own." Adeline studied him carefully, looking for the lies, the manipulation, the excuses, but all she saw was exhaustion and genuine shame. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I almost lost everything that matters. Your mother barely speaks to me. Your sisters are ashamed. And you," his voice broke, "you were the one who always fixed things, always made it right, and I repaid you by lying and putting you in danger." "Yes, you did. I can't undo it, but I can try to do better." He met her gaze, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm not asking for money or rescue. I'm just asking for a chance, to prove I can change." Every instinct screamed not to trust him, to protect herself and Rowan from another disaster. But she thought about Cordelia's apology, about choosing peace over anger, about the possibility that people could actually change if they wanted it badly enough. "I'll give you one chance," she said carefully. "Not money, not bailouts, but a chance to prove you mean it." "Thank you, son. I'm not finished." Her voice hardened. "You'll continue treatment. You'll be completely transparent about your finances. I want monthly reports. And if you gamble even once, if you lie even once, we're done, permanently. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear. And you owe His Grace an apology. A real one for what you put us through." Charles nodded, looking sick. "I'll speak to him." After he left, Adeline sat in the silent morning room, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step toward actual healing. Rowan found her there an hour later. "Your father apologized," he said, "very thoroughly. Offered to submit to financial oversight, promised never to ask us for money, the whole speech." "Do you believe him?" "I believe he's scared enough to try." Rowan sat beside her. "The question is whether you believe him." "I want to, but I'm terrified of being fooled again." "Then we verify." He took her hand. "Monthly financial reports like you asked. Regular check-ins with his doctor. We give him enough rope to either climb or hang himself." "That's harsh." "That's realistic." He squeezed her fingers. "You can hope he changes while still protecting yourself. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." She leaned against him, grateful for his steadiness. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a woman who taught me that strength and compassion can coexist. I'm a quick study." The spring brought unexpected news. Margaret was pregnant. The announcement came at a family dinner, the first one where all the Harrows had gathered at Blackmore House since the confrontation months ago. Margaret glowed as she shared the news, Lord Pembroke beaming beside her. "A baby," Eleanor said, tears streaming. "Oh, my darling girl." Adeline felt joy and something else, a pang of longing she hadn't expected. She wanted that, wanted to build a family with Rowan, to create something new and beautiful from their unexpected partnership. Later, as they prepared for bed, she brought it up. "Did you see Margaret's face when she announced the pregnancy?" She looked happy. Rowan was removing his cufflinks, his movements methodical. "Your mother cried for 10 minutes straight. Would you want that? Children?" His hand stilled. "Is that something you're asking hypothetically or specifically?" "Specifically." She turned to face him. "I know we never discussed it. It wasn't part of the original arrangement, but things are different now." "They are." He set down the cufflinks, giving her his full attention. "Do you want children?" "I think so. Eventually." She paused. "Do you?" "I never thought about it before. Children seemed like another duty, another expectation I'd have to fulfill." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "But with you?" "Yes. I want that someday. Someday soon or someday distant. Let's say someday flexible." He smiled. "We've only been married 6 months. We have time." She kissed him, grateful for his patience, for the space to want things she'd never let herself dream about. That night, as they lay tangled together in the massive bed, Adeline thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago. Invisible. Desperate. Willing to sell herself to save people who barely appreciated the sacrifice. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned to fight, to set boundaries, to choose herself without guilt. And somehow, in choosing herself, she'd found something better than she'd imagined possible. The final confrontation came in April. Adeline was hosting a charity luncheon, one of the season's biggest events, with every important woman in London society in attendance, when Cordelia arrived with her fiancé. The room went silent. Everyone remembered the scandal, the rumors, the very public battle between the new Duchess and the Duke's former lover. Adeline could have refused her entry, could have made it clear Cordelia wasn't welcome. Instead, she walked across the room and greeted her warmly. "Lady Cordelia, how lovely to see you, and you must be Mr. Thornton." Cordelia's fiancé, a kind-faced man in his 30s, bowed. "Your Grace, thank you for the invitation." "Of course, any friend of Lady Cordelia's is welcome here." The message was clear. The feud was over. The Duchess of Blackmore was secure enough to be gracious. Later, as tea was served, Lady Pembroke approached Adeline privately. "That was well done, Your Grace. Very gracious. There's no point in holding grudges. It only makes everyone miserable." Still, lesser women would have turned her away. Lady Pembroke paused. "I misjudged you when you first married His Grace. I thought you were just a desperate girl trading yourself for your family's debts." "I was." The honesty clearly startled the older woman. "Then, how did you become this?" "This?" "Someone formidable. Someone who commands respect without demanding it." Adeline thought about the past 6 months. The battles fought and won. The boundaries set. The love found in the most unexpected place. "I stopped apologizing for surviving," she said simply, "and started owning my choices instead of being ashamed of them." Lady Pembroke smiled. "The Duke chose well, better than anyone realized." The luncheon was a triumph. Adeline raised more money for the orphanage than any previous charity event, secured commitments from 3 wealthy donors, and managed to make even the most difficult guests feel valued and heard. When the last guest departed, she found Rowan waiting in the study with champagne. "I heard it was a success," he said, pouring 2 glasses. "You heard correctly." She accepted the champagne, sinking into the chair across from him. "Lady Pembroke said you chose well when you married me." "I did, though I'm not sure I chose so much as got incredibly lucky." "We both got lucky." She raised her glass. "To unlikely partnerships that somehow work. To partnerships that became more." He touched his glass to hers. "I have something for you." He handed her a small box. Inside was a ring, not the Blackmore family ring she already wore, but something new. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the blue stone the exact color of the dress she'd worn to their first ball together. What's this? A gift to mark 6 months of marriage. He took the ring, sliding it onto her right hand. The first ring was duty. This one is choice. Her throat tightened. Rowan, I'm choosing you, Adeline, not because I need a duchess, not because it's practical or strategic, because I love you. Because 6 months ago I got the best thing that ever happened to me, and I want to make sure you know it. She kissed him, tasting champagne and tears and gratitude for this complicated, unexpected, utterly perfect man. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. More than I thought possible. Good. He pulled her into his lap, champagne forgotten, because you're stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates. That night, as they lay together watching the spring rain fall against the windows, Adeline thought about the journey that had brought them here. From strangers negotiating a transaction to partners building something real, from survival to actual joy. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Marrying me? Never. You? Not even once. Liar. I heard you crying that first night. She laughed softly. Okay, maybe once, but I got over it. When? She thought about it. When you stood up for me against those women. When you came home to protect me from the creditors. When you looked at me like I mattered. You always mattered. I know that now. She turned in his arms to face him. Thank you. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For choosing capability over beauty. For giving me a chance to become someone I actually like. You were always someone worth liking. You just needed someone to notice. Well, I'm glad it was you. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, like they had all the time in the world. And they did. Years stretching ahead of them, full of possibility and promise and the kind of love that grew from honest foundations. Outside, London continued its endless dance. Carriages rattled past. Rain fell on ancient streets. Life moved forward, indifferent to individual stories. But inside Blackmore House, two people who'd started as strangers had built something extraordinary. Not perfect. They still fought, still struggled, still had moments of doubt and fear. But real, honest, strong enough to weather whatever storms came next. Adeline fell asleep in Rowan's arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, and thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago. That girl had been terrified, desperate, willing to settle for mere survival. This woman wanted more, demanded more, and had found it in the most unexpected place, in a marriage that started as a transaction and became a triumph, in a partnership that transformed into love. In choosing herself, she'd found everything she never knew she needed. And in the morning, when she woke to spring sunshine and Rowan's sleepy smile, she knew with absolute certainty that every sacrifice, every battle, every moment of fear had been worth it. Because the woman who'd been invisible at balls now commanded entire rooms. The daughter who'd sold herself to save her family had built a legacy of her own. And the Duchess who'd started as a convenience had become something far more powerful. A woman who knew her worth and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. 3 months later, Adeline stood in the garden at Blackmore House, watching summer roses bloom in colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Rowan found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. What are you thinking about? Everything. How far we've come. How different this is from what I expected. Better or worse? So much better. She leaned back against him. I have news. Good news or complicated news? Both. She turned in his arms, her heart racing. I'm pregnant. His face went through a series of expressions, shock, joy, terror, wonder, before settling on something that looked like awe. You're sure? The physician confirmed it this morning. When? Late winter, probably. January or February. He kissed her, fierce and tender all at once. We're having a baby. We are. She laughed at his dazed expression. Are you happy? I'm terrified. Ecstatic. Completely unprepared. He cupped her face. And happier than I knew was possible. Good. Because I'm all of those things too. They stood in the garden, summer sun warm on their faces, and talked about the future. about names and nurseries and all the ways their lives were about to change again. "Do you think we'll be good at this?" Adeline asked. "Parenting? Probably not at first, but we'll figure it out together." He smiled. "Like we figured out everything else." "By fighting through it? By being honest, by choosing each other, by building something real instead of settling for comfortable lies." She thought about that, about how they'd started, two people negotiating a transaction, and how they'd become this. Partners, lovers, best friends, two people who'd found in each other exactly what they needed, even when they hadn't known they needed it. "I love you," she said. "I love you too, more than I thought I could love anyone. Even when I'm impossible? Especially then." The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and exciting and full of possibility. There would be challenges, raising a child, navigating politics, managing family dynamics. But they'd face it all together the way they'd faced everything else, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd started as strangers and become each other's home. And in the garden at Blackmore House, surrounded by impossible roses and summer sunshine, Adeline finally understood what she'd gained when she'd agreed to marry a cold, practical duke she barely knew. Not just security or status or escape from her father's debts, but a partner who saw her strength and wasn't threatened by it. A love that grew from honesty instead of fantasy. A life built on truth instead of pretty lies. She'd sold herself to save her family, but in doing so, she'd found something far more valuable. A future worth having, a love worth fighting for, and a man worth choosing every single day for the rest of her life. The Duchess of Blackmore had arrived, and she had absolutely no intention of ever being invisible again.